in these conditions. More on that now from Martin Brundle and James Allen.
So just waiting for the red lights to go out at the end of the pit lane. First car out in this first qualifying session here in Brazil will be Kimi Raikkonen, championship leader, winner in Sepang 2 weeks ago. As you can see though, a lot of standing water on the pit lane exit. We've been told by race control there's standing water in turn 2, turn 4, turn 8 and turn 12, and well, that's quite a lot of standing water, Martin.
It is indeed. Kimi went out this morning and spun off on the outlap. We know that both Michelin and Bridgestone have only bought the very lightly treaded rain tyres here, and we could see quite an alarming scene this weekend if there's heavy rain, as is predicted through Saturday and Sunday too. So Raikkonen just completed 2 laps this morning, elected not to go out again because there was standing water on the track, then missed the moment. So this is quite an adventure into the unknown for Kimi Raikkonen. As you say, James, championship leader, so he goes first. The drivers have been swarming around the back of the pits, talking to each other. They're not happy because of these new regulations where the tyre manufacturers can only bring one type of rain tyre for the weekend. And as we saw Bridgestone do in the previous 2 races this season, they've elected for this intermediate or lightly treaded tyre, and it just will not work with a lot of standing water. Luckily, it stopped raining now, so as they go through this 1-hour single lap session to determine tomorrow's running order for final qualifying 2 on Saturday afternoon, the track should get better and better, but Raikkonen will really be tested to the limit, James, as he heads to cross the timing beam to start his one and only flying lap in this session.
Yeah, it's been raining pretty hard here since fairly early this morning. The Friday morning cars that went out in the test session got about 50 minutes of dry running before the heavens opened, and it's been raining more or less non-stop ever since, so a good 4 hours, and certainly the 1 hour of free practice that the other teams had was absolutely deluged with water. On board with Raikkonen, look at the spray.
Yes, and this is where he spun off this morning, just minding his own business, cruising down to that turn 4, and the car just swapped ends and off he went. He somehow managed to miss the barriers, but quite a bit less standing water now, although there's a big rooster tail of spray behind him. And David Coulthard told me in the break that you just cannot see, even if you're within 5 seconds of the car in front, you can't see anything, and there's certainly a great deal of concern if we've got a wet race here this weekend.
Yeah, perhaps should explain as we look back at the face of Kimi Raikkonen exactly what we're talking about with these tyres. The new rule for this season is that the tyre company's only allowed to bring one type of wet tyre. In the past you would have an intermediate tyre that they would bring along, and also a heavy wet tyre, or a monsoon tyre as it was sometimes known, for days when there was lots of heavy standing water on the track. But with the new rule, which came in this season, only one type of wet allowed, and because intermediate tyres generally have a greater level of flexibility, that's what the 2 tyre companies have elected to bring, which is fine on days like Melbourne, as Raikkonen cuts the beam in 1:24.6. It's fine on days like Melbourne when you've got a little bit of rain setting on the track. But on days like this, if this was a race, they'd have to start it behind a safety car, and it would really be very difficult.
Yes, well, the standing water certainly cleared away. We know they put a lot of new drains in here this year, and good job they have done too. But this morning a quick lap was a 1:28 in the wet, and Raikkonen's done a 1:24. So clearly the track's significantly better, or maybe Raikkonen just pulled something stunning out of the bag from a standing start. Coulthard was just about the quickest man in the rain this morning, did more laps than most, so he should have a reasonably good feel for the racetrack, and you'll see him jink around, move around, trying to miss at the end of the straight the biggest puddles, but they really are moving away quite quickly. He's a quarter of a second faster than Raikkonen down to sector 1 as he moves then into the heart of the lap. And this is a wonderful opportunity to see the aerodynamics working on a Formula 1 car. You can see how hard the air is leaving the back of the car, how much energy is going on there. That's where the downforce is coming from.
Whoa!
Coulthard locking a brake, running quite wide. I don't think he'll be at all concerned about that. In fact, he's heading out there to try to find a little bit of extra grip where it's often gritty and dirty off the racing line. In the wet, that can give you more grip, and Coulthard knows that well from his karting days. But if you watch the rain and spray pouring off the back of the car, you can see the aerodynamics at work.
Nice shot there on the front wing of David Coulthard's car. He's dropped a little bit now relative to Kimi Räikkönen, thanks to that running wide in the earlier part of the lap. Climbing up this great big hill then from Yung Khao corner all the way up 60-70 miles an hour up to about 170 miles an hour here as he crosses the start-finish line. And yes, that little mistake early on in the lap just cost him that time relative to his teammate Räikkönen, but they're pretty evenly matched for pace. Well, he knows his way around here in the wet. David Coulthard won here a couple of years ago in the pouring rain, so he's obviously going strongly. Juan Montoya just winding up to start his first flying lap. And Martin, a tremendous sense of optimism in the Williams team this weekend. They had a very strong test last week at Barcelona. Ralf Schumacher was fastest. I'm told there are 7 major changes on this car from the car which started the season. Front wing, rear wing, new gearbox.
Yes, and Montoya completely missing the apex of turn 1 there. And you're absolutely right, James. They do seem to be pretty upbeat about their chances here. They've always been strong here. Good strong engine pulling up the hill on the long start-finish straight. Look at that, half a second up. Sharing the same Michelin low-cut tyres, wet-cut tyres as the 2 McLarens, and Montoya really pushing quite hard despite running very wide. Oh!
Whoa!
He'll just save that. There's enough tarmac to get away with that, and that certainly spoiled the lap, hasn't it? That in there to turn 6 then, and Montoya just locked a rear brake under into the braking zone, and really it was all about then saving the car instead of getting into the corner.
So slipping and sliding out there. In the old days when they used to have gravel traps in every corner, he would have been beached in it and that would have been the end of his lap. But increasingly now in Formula 1 we're seeing large asphalt areas. The drivers prefer them to the runoff areas, don't they? They like to have a nice bit of tarmac to go onto. They believe it slows the car down more effectively than the gravel trap. Just look how much work Montoya's having to do at the wheel to keep the car pointing in the straight line.
Nonetheless, Williams, I would imagine, still hoping for a dry race. We know the Michelins tend to be a little bit stronger around here, certainly have been in the last couple of seasons, and he lost a lot of time in the even after his off, and Montoya clearly losing confidence. And that means he's going to run quite early on tomorrow afternoon, but who knows? It's the luck of the draw. If it is raining, it may end up being better for him. It may be a stroke of luck to have to run quite early in tomorrow afternoon's qualifying 2.
Rubens Barrichello on track, second in the Malaysian Grand Prix 2 weeks ago, and he's starting his first flying lap. As you say, Martin, it's a complete lottery here with the weather. The forecast is for thunderstorms throughout the weekend, really, and we've certainly had plenty of rain this morning, so who knows if it's an advantage to go first or last tomorrow. Certainly if it's dry, it'll be an advantage to go last. Rubens quite a bit quicker than Kimi Räikkönen in that first sector, 0.7 of a second. And he really is looking to reverse his fortunes around this place. He's had 8 straight retirements in this Grand Prix, and so much expectation always on his shoulders as Brazil's leading Grand Prix driver, and he's so desperate to deliver this year.
Great shot then looking through the cockpit of Rubens Barrichello, and this really is coming into the zone, James. These track conditions are where the intermediate or the lightly cut tyres actually work best, and we're pretty sure that the Bridgestone is much stronger than the Michelin in these kind of conditions. Seems like the Michelin's better when they have to jump to slicks. They can go earlier, the Michelin runs, and look, you can see just how well that Ferrari and those Bridgestone Inters are working. Barrichello at 1 1/3 seconds up already. There's not too much to be gained normally in this final climb up there. It's quite a short final sector of about 18 seconds, but Barrichello will easily go fastest.
Yeah, Rubens Barrichello then, fastest so far by 1.3 seconds. Just to remind you, what we're doing here is establishing the order that the cars will go in tomorrow's qualifying session. It's the Saturday qualifying that establishes the grid for Sunday's race. All this session does is establish what order they'll go in tomorrow. Fernando Alonso, on pole position 2 weeks ago in Sepang, had a spin this morning in the rain earlier in the practice session. Quite a spectacular spin. Managed to gather it all up though. And what can he do? As Martin says, the track conditions seeming to be improving with every lap that goes through.
Yes, and there's a bit of finger pointing going on as to who came up with this new single tyre wet regulation. It seems as if the decision lays at the door of the team bosses. They voted this one through quite quickly. Obviously had to be ratified by the FIA. And a little bit of thought that maybe the Michelin shod teams were keen to push this through because Bridgestone seemed to have a better range of wet tyres. but I think it's going to backfire on them if the team bosses did push this one through. And it certainly didn't seem to be the technical working group, more like the Formula One Commission. And as I say, there's a little bit of finger pointing going on behind the pit garages.
Fernando Alonso then working his way around the lap. Tremendous upsurge of interest in Spain as a result of this young man's performance in the Malaysian Grand Prix. Viewing figures have gone through the roof. He's found himself on the front of every newspaper going in Spain. And he was saying yesterday that when he went off to Australia nearly a month ago, hardly anybody knew who he was in Spain, and now he's an absolute superstar. At last week's test in Barcelona, he was absolutely mobbed everywhere he went. So just shows you what a hype-driven business Formula One is. And at the moment, he's riding on the crest of a wave, but not on this lap. 2.3 seconds down on Rubens Barrichello's time. And Alonso not finding the grip at the moment, and almost 3 seconds down at the end. So the order, we've had the first 5 cars, and we're now into the brief break. It's Barrichello, Raikkonen, Coulthard, Alonso and Montoya in 5th place. Michael Schumacher warming up for his first flying lap. The order at the moment: Barrichello fastest, Raikkonen 2nd, Coulthard 3rd, Alonso 4th and Montoya 5th. Michael Schumacher is 6th in the World Championship, and that's why he's going out 6th in this qualifying session. And on his warm-up lap, Martin, he did a bit of a 180 degrees, 360 degree spin, which will certainly have given him something to think about.
Yes, spinning on an outlap. The world champion really not having a stellar season, is he, at the moment? And his confidence on this lap is going to be interesting to watch, because he must wonder where the grip level is as he was just coasting around. He's lost a quarter of a second to Barrichello as he's just trying to feel the car now and begin to believe in it, because it really did spin easily on him. Here's the corner now where Montoya went off, and Michael still having to struggle with the car there. It's where you're braking and downshifting at the same time, locks the rear wheels up, and it wasn't quite as violent. There's that wider run there through La Rancha, Piñarino corner. Quite a lot of banking there, should help the car pick up grip early. You've always got to get it straight before you really want to nail the throttle in the wet. You get much better traction. The tyres seem to be much happier when they're not having to slide or yaw. They just got to give you forward motion. And Michael gingerly on the throttle. Then where is he compared to Barrichello? He's just 2nd down, so it really did knock his confidence, James.
Yeah, I think it did. It's also raining more hard now than it was when Barrichello was out a few minutes ago. The rain beginning to come down a bit like it did this morning in the free practice session, when a lot of cars were spinning off the racetrack. So Schumacher caught out a little bit by the conditions here, and he's going to have to pay a price for that. 4th, 2.3 seconds down on his own teammate in the same car. You can see that's how much weather conditions can affect things, especially with this single lap qualifying, and some long faces in the Ferrari garage. Jarno Trulli on track, 7th man out.
Yes, and if it rains anymore, they'll suddenly be doing 1 minute 30s instead of 1 minute 20s. That's the difference it makes when you don't believe your car's going to stick to the road, even in a straight line, let alone under braking or into the corners. The Renault really did hook up nicely to the first apex there. If he can get on the throttle, whoa, he had to get out of it, and that'll cost him time in that corner and all the way down the straight. The drag of these cars is such that you never recover top speed if you don't drive onto the straight on at full speed. Trulli really hacksawing away at the steering wheel, then desperately trying to find some grip from that Renault, and he's already a 2nd down, and he's just 21 seconds into the lap.
This is where Montoya went off. Trulli manages to gather it in, get it into the apex of the corner. I imagine the concentration level, it's always intense on a qualifying lap, but it must be double intense when you've got conditions like this, because you're second-guessing the conditions and the grip levels all the time.
Yes, you're having to respond to what the car does instead of, you know, you're behind the car all the time instead of being right on top of it, and you just begin to lack belief that it's going to stick. That's certainly where Trulli's at the moment. Certainly fast corners like this, if you just suddenly let the back end slide, traction control will not pick it up fast enough, and you will go flying off into the gravel. So a 2nd Renault then that's significantly off the pace, despite sharing the same Michelin tyres of the 2 faster McLarens. Barrichello way out in front, and Raikkonen called up Michael Schumacher. Where does Trulli come in? And he goes in just slower than Alonso on a 26.5. Montoya still bringing up the rear after he had that big leery slide off into the tarmac runoff areas. Now then, the second Williams of Ralf Schumacher.
Yeah, fastest, as I said before, at the Barcelona test last week, and a lot more confident really than he's been any time this season. He was saying yesterday that the team are really on and up. A lot of changes to this car, both mechanical and aerodynamic, have given them a lot of speed, and certainly in dry conditions they'll be able to show that. And it's quite possible this weekend, if we get a dry situation, that Williams might actually come to the fore. We've had McLaren winning the first 2 races, even though Ferrari have had a quick car, but one senses that this is a car that's ready now to really deliver in dry conditions. Ralf Schumacher half a second down on Rubens Barrichello in the first sector. The conditions for him are identical to those his brother had a moment ago, and also Jarno Trulli. So it was rather a cautious lap from Michael Schumacher, and the spin he had on the formation lap clearly was weighing on his mind. Ralf just struggling to get the car to turn in there.
I personally like these new regulations in that we can see every car, every driver, every corner, and really get a good feel for what's happening. And this is an extreme test of skill. It's one flying lap. In a way, it doesn't affect Saturday's grid, Sunday's grid rather, if Saturday's still a wet session. But I don't think the drivers like it very much. I think they're finding it's not what it's all about. They can't dial the car in. They can't push harder and harder. They're having to tread carefully. They've got literally 1 minute and 25 seconds of action in the whole afternoon. They don't like it.
Now, they can't really express themselves, but then again, it is putting more pressure on them as Ralf Schumacher goes through in 7th place. So he is just in front of his teammate Montoya. The 2 Williams is the slowest so far. So Ralf Schumacher lost an awful lot of time there. It's putting more pressure on the drivers, no question about that, and they're certainly more having to be a bit more honest about the mistakes that they make. Put their hands up and say, I'm sorry, I just was too conservative there, or I made a mistake there. And it's very interesting to see who's getting it right and who's getting it wrong as well on the single lap qualifying. This guy's got it right so far, both Grand Prix. Heinz-Harald Frentzen on his return to Formula One with the Sauber team after most of the year out last year when the Arrows team didn't complete the season. And he's going well on his return. Said the other day, I'm not as good as I used to be, I'm better than I used to be. And at 35 years of age, probably his last run in Formula One, he's certainly keen to make a point.
Well, a solid first sector time then for Frentzen, slower than Barrichello, but certainly as fast as the 2 McLarens. Does he have any dramas into Ferradura? No, he does not. It doesn't matter that he runs a little bit wide. Your tyre, your rear tyre, is happy to brake, it's happy to accelerate, and it's happy to go around a corner. But if you ask it to do all 3 things at the same time, it says, I can't do that, and it lets go of the racetrack. And that's why you've got to get them straightened up, these cars in the rain, and just let the tyre have to push the car forward and not have to turn it or brake it at the same time. Frentzen then doing a pretty solid job, it has to be said, on this lap. Looked comfortable this morning, old, wise head, but look, somehow he's lost a huge amount of time in the middle. Didn't see where that happened.
Yes, he has lost a lot of time. But what was interesting was he was nearly 2 seconds faster than Ralf Schumacher in the first sector. So a really massive first sector for Frentzen, but he's had a few problems in the middle sector. Where's this going to bring him? About 5th or 6th, possibly? 6th it is. 3 seconds down on Rubens Barrichello, and that lap from Rubens is beginning to look pretty impressive. You'd almost put your mortgage on it, your house on it, wouldn't you? Rubens getting a good lap on conditions like this. He's done it so many times in the past. The pole positions he's had have been on wet, changeable sort of days. He just seems to have an innate feel for a car. Yeah. Button, though, Button's struggling to keep on top of this one.
Yeah, Button's not even got to the start line yet, and he's frightening me silly. It's really fighting the back of that car. He was pretty brave with it, though. Hung on in there on the throttle pedal. But that's in just the left kinks. Normally there are nothing in a Formula One car. Shows you just how slippery the racetrack is at the moment. Turn 3 then, and now the back end's a little bit more bolted to the ground. And a tremendous amount of rear wing on that, trying to push those tyres and keep them in contact with the surface. And again, not a bad run. That's pretty sensible, normal first sector time, with the exception of Barrichello. And Jensen, hang on to it. No, you're not going to hang on to it. He lost it on the way out of turn 5. They're only polystyrene, those brake marker boards, so they will have done very little damage to the car and none to the driver. And away he goes. But he got a tank slapper on and didn't get into it early enough and correct it.
And he's got mud all over that beautiful white paintwork. Someone's going to have to spend the rest of the afternoon cleaning that. I imagine a wry smile on the face of his teammate Jacques Villeneuve. The rivalry between the two of them has gone rather quiet, actually, in the last weeks since Malaysia. Villeneuve seems to have calmed down, really, and neither of them are saying anything rude about each other, but no, nevertheless, I imagine Villeneuve will have enjoyed that moment.
Now, what will he do? Will he abort that lap? Oh, he's lost the rear wing. Oh, Jensen, get on the radio, tell him to slow down because he's damaged the rear wing post. I hope they're speaking to him, otherwise he'll be spinning like a top down that straight. Now he's got to come in. I was interested to see if he abandoned the lap and just settled for last, or whether he would keep going and hope other drivers also had a problem, which would give him a better slot for tomorrow afternoon.
Talk me through this rear wing coming off. I mean, he hit what looked like polystyrene.
Yeah, he did, but he's doing 150 miles an hour at the time. There's still a lot of energy going on. I mean, his lucky strike stickers knocked down 2 or 3 Skittles down that back straight, didn't they? And there's still enough energy going on there to damage the rear wing post. That post is designed to, to push down, to the energy in the rear wing, the aerodynamic effects of pushing down onto the gearbox. Give it a big whack sideways and it'll break.
So the session has been stopped. Debris on the track, obviously, a lot of it. None of it will take an awful long time to clear up. He's just hit that marker post, which was one of the braking boards for the corner, so it gives us a chance to have a look at one or two of the things that happened. This is Michael Schumacher spinning on his outlap. You can see it was just a very, very gentle 180 going into the corner there.
Presumably this will be another angle of it, and look, he cranked the opposite lock on as soon as he could, but no way of recovering the back of that Ferrari. And no wonder there's a bit of a troubled face there we're looking at, James.
Well, yes, Michael Schumacher not got the smile on his face that we've been used to seeing. Here's another look at Jenson Button's incident, getting all out of shape. You can see up onto the grass. He's a passenger at this point. Whacks that board, whacks another one. Bits of polystyrene flying everywhere. Looks more like a rally car than a Formula 1 car. Bit of polystyrene getting stuck underneath the floor as well. And that's the story of Jenson Button. Ted Kravitz hopefully can tell us a little bit more about Jenson's situation.
Yes, James, the rear wing was actually still attached to the beam that holds it when he came in. There were bits of polystyrene stuck in the diffuser and just under the rear wing. I think you can tell that it was just the polystyrene that knocked it off. There wasn't some kind of structural failure after that. Jenson got out, was very disappointed, very angry looking. There wasn't much of a reaction from Villeneuve, though, I must say. A slight narrowing of the eyes, but I don't know if that was as much, big shunt, rather than, hooray, look what Jenson's done.
Yes, there's the polystyrene stuck in the front wing. On the slower replay, we could see clearly how the rear wing got broken, because the 100-meter board, the brake marker board, he hit absolutely square on with the rear wing. And he got out of shape on the white line and just tried to hang on to it on the throttle and correct it on the steering, and just didn't get on top of the car quite early enough. So Barrichello then remains comfortably fastest. So, into the second 10 of this Friday qualifying session. At the moment, the order you can see on your screens: Rubens Barrichello got a real peach of a lap in just at the right moment. The rain had abated and he did a super lap, and there's a big margin between him and Kimi Raikkonen in second place. That's Juan Montoya having a moment. A few of the drivers have had moments. Jenson Button has spun off. Michael Schumacher had a moment on his outlap. Ted Kravitz is down there with David Coulthard, currently lying in third place.
Might well be that if it does continue to rain, you're in the box seats for this.
These sort of conditions, you just go out and do your lap. You're not qualifying. People should not be under any illusions they're watching qualifying here. It's a creation of the new rules, which I don't believe shows Formula One in the light that it should be, because people want to see cars running at the same time and knowing who was the quickest guy on that track or who had the quickest car on that track. What you see now is it's after rain, the guys maybe following us don't have an opportunity to go as quick, and clearly Rubens had an opportunity on a drier track to take a chunk of time off. So it's just whoever, when you're on the track at that particular time is the only time you can judge where the conditions are.
Yep, Coulthard then obviously totally underwhelmed by the Friday qualifying one, and well, he's made his point. What do you think, James?
I have to say, I don't actually agree with him. I think this has been quite an interesting session. It's the track conditions have changed. It's rained, it's stopped raining, and the drivers have had to deal with what's thrown at them. I mean, it's very easy for us in our position to say we like this. We don't have to go out and drive the cars and have all this extra pressure put on us. But I think it's certainly a good spectacle, no question about that. But as you say, Martin, the drivers don't seem to be terribly happy. one had a sense before this session started, when it was raining quite hard, a lot of them didn't want to go out at all. As it was, that the rain started to drop off, and they have gone out and done their laps. Nobody yet has failed to go out, although Jenson Button has failed to set a time, having spun off and clouted the polystyrene marker boards. But he's the only driver so far failing to set a time, but everybody has actually gone out on track.
Yes, and the disappearance of those marker boards is not a disadvantage to those running for the rest of this session, because I bet they didn't even know they were there. You're not looking over to the left when you're heading towards that Ferradura corner, and you certainly don't brake anywhere near 100 or 50 metres. You go right into the heart of the corner. Even in the wet, we saw where Montoya started to get out of shape. He was virtually in the corner as he hit the brakes, and so no disadvantage then with those things disappearing, and I'm really wondering what they're doing there.
Nick Heidfeld out on track in the second of the two Saubers. His teammate, Heinz-Harald Frentzen, is sixth at the moment on a 1:26.375. So that's what Heidfeld will be aiming at first of all. But obviously, with the conditions changing as they are all the time, then it's quite possible it could be a lot faster than that or a lot slower than that, depending on what he encounters when he's out on track. A little bit of a twitch there on the exit of Lake Descent, coming into the Ferradura. This is where Button went off, and Montoya. No problems for Heidfeld. Great big rooster tails of spray coming off the back of this Sauber car. And it's been a tidy start to the season, really, for both the Sauber drivers. They've been competitive throughout practice and qualifying, both the Grand Prix so far. They've really only managed to get 1 points finish so far, but I'm sure that they'll add to that. As Heidfeld struggles a little bit, that's where Michael Schumacher had his spin.
Yes, Heidfeld, again, like his teammate Frentzen, looks good, looks very good, but Frentzen lost a couple of seconds somewhere in the middle, and so has Heidfeld, and I can't see where or why. The car seems well hooked up. Maybe they just haven't got the confidence to carry apex speed, but no real reason then why that Sauber's not quite a bit faster, looking at how little correction generally the drivers comparatively with some of the other cars are having to make. Over the line he goes then, some 3.8 seconds adrift. That's absolutely amazing. I mean, David Coulthard saying, well, you know, you're not comparing apples with apples, the track has changed, and you can see his point, you have to say. You can see his point of, look, you know, what are we learning? It's great entertainment for us. They've got 1:25 of terror, really, if their tyres are not connected to the ground. But in a way, I'm not sure it's really telling us much for tomorrow afternoon.
No, absolutely not. But we had qualifying sessions in the past that were wet at the beginning, dry at the end, or dry at the beginning and wet at the end, and it just happened you had to be out of the right track at the right time. So it's happened before in racing. I don't really see what the problem is. It's certainly an interesting spectacle to see how the drivers tackle the challenge. Here's Jacques Villeneuve, and he'll be looking to a bit of a better job than Jenson Button did. He's half a second down on Barrichello's what is beginning to look like a really stellar lap from Rubens Barrichello here at Interlagos. This is where Button lost it. Those little bits of those crumbs on the left-hand side of the track, the remnants of the Button incident. Villeneuve working the steering wheel. Never really been at his best in the rain throughout his Formula One career, Jacques Villeneuve, but seems to be keeping it all together at the moment.
Yes, where he cut his teeth, mostly in America. They don't really race too much in the rain over there, especially on the ovals, of course. And he never really did seem, as you say, comfortable in the early days. I think he's really come to terms more with it in this last 2 or 3 years. But Villeneuve then will be cutting the beam soon, and he is 1.8 down. That's still going to put him somewhere solidly inside the top 10 if he has a good run up the hill. No dramas with the back of the car. He certainly is either slightly, they was trying to get away from him there, wasn't he? He's either slightly more gentle on the throttle than Jenson, which would be unusual, or he's just got it bolted down better at the back, and indeed he goes into 5th place.
Nice lap from Jacques Villeneuve. When the drivers were talking about not going out before this session, one driver who said stuff that I'm definitely going out was Jacques Villeneuve. Always gung-ho, always ready to go for it, and a terrific lap then from Villeneuve puts him 5th as we look now at Ralph Furman.
And there's another car that's trying to get away from its driver virtually in a straight line. Tough call for Ralph Furman here, and he doesn't know this racetrack. Doesn't really, talking to him yesterday, he's not super comfortable yet with the car, doesn't feel that he knows what it's going to do next, and drove very nicely in Malaysia, it has to be said, and another good run here this weekend will do wonders for his credibility and his confidence. And he should know the rain quite well, though. He's raced a lot in Japan, where it's constantly sort of torrential rain conditions, and I'm wondering if these conditions don't suit Ralph quite well. As ever, he's sort of cranking the wheel quite hard, really sort of not coaxing his Jordan into the corner, but literally launching it at the corner. And Ralph then, he's got several corners to go before we know his second section time. He was about 10th fastest in the first sector. Let's see what he's done with the middle. And sort of racing line does he want to take? Does he want to take the Carter's line? No, he doesn't. He takes the normal Formula One line. This is a difficult corner even in the drive. And what you're better to do is take the speed through. Look at that. He's absolutely, according to that, and I don't believe that sector time, it's not come up on the main computer in front of us. I have a feeling that was it said that he was level with Barrichello, which means he had a brilliant middle sector. And we haven't seen that middle sector come up on the timing screen in front of us. Over the line he goes then. And I think we've got he did a 1:28.0, which puts him actually 12th at the moment.
It's rather confusing. The middle sector time and the final sector time are not appearing on the timing computers. So there we are. The computer does seem to have worked out that that was his overall lap time, but I'm sure there's a bit of sorting out to be done there. Ralph Furman 12th then. Only Jenson Button behind him at the moment. Button failing to record a time. Barrichello fastest, Raikkonen second, Coulthard third, Michael Schumacher fourth, Villeneuve fifth, Alonso sixth and Frentzen seventh. Trulli 8th, Ralf Schumacher 9th, Heidfeld 10th, Jos Verstappen on track in the Minardi. He's just under a second down on pace setter Rubens Barrichello in the first sector.
Verstappen neat and tidy, giving the white lines a bit of respect. In other words, not going anywhere near them. And they do usually punish you when the track is wet. Just back of the car, just trying to get away from him, gently coercing it back into line. You've got such a tremendous power to weight ratio, over 800 horsepower in 600 kilos of car. And really, in these conditions, you've got a total surplus of horsepower. You really could do with leaving a couple of plug leads off. You might go faster, I think, if you didn't have so much power, desperately trying to get it down on the racetrack. Verstappen then still that sort of mandatory 2+ seconds down on fastest man Barrichello. Back end reasonably secure. What's scary is in race conditions when the back end of the car is sliding around like that and you can't see where you're going. And he goes 10th, quicker than Heidfeld, quicker than Montoya, and quicker than Furman.
Yep, always gone well in the wet, Jos Verstappen. Think back to the Malaysian Grand Prix a couple of years ago. He was up for as high as 4th in an Arrows in the wet conditions there. Comes from Holland, so sees plenty of rain over there. This is the Toyota of Cristiano de Mata. Now, this is not an easy call at all. He's a rookie. He does know this track because he's Brazilian. He raced here in Formula 3 back in 1994, but it's that long ago since he last went round here. He's only done 1 hour of running in the rain, and so he's not really refamiliarised himself with the place, and he's just got to make sure he gets it to the end of the lap, really, isn't he?
Yes, de Mata, I think, looking seriously good this year, despite not having scored any points. I can't believe Toyota didn't bag a couple of points in those first two slightly unusual races that we've had this year. And it amazes me to see Panis running last today, his teammate, because he's last in the championship. De Mata, then we're looking back at his front suspension. Look just how little movement there is. The piston you can see going in and out halfway up the car, halfway up the chassis there. Of course, that's the steering rack and the steering arm. If you look at the bar at an angle, the push rod at an angle, it's going in and working the shock absorbers and springs or torsion bars. Tiny amounts of movement. Most of the travel on these cars is in the squash of the sidewall of the tyre. And de Mata, once again, another driver, best part of 3 seconds adrift at the second sector point.
So the drivers out at the moment are from the teams that haven't had a points finish so far this year. Toyota, Jordan, Jaguar and Minardi. De Mata goes 8th, so his final sector was very competitive. And he has got Trulli, Ralf Schumacher, Verstappen, Heidfeld, Montoya and Furman all behind him. So a tidy lap there by Cristiano de Mata, who's quickly establishing something of a reputation for himself in Formula One. Well, Louise is down with Jenson Button.
Jenson, your BAR's looking a bit like a rally car at the moment. Talk us through it.
Yeah, made a bit of mistake down it. I don't know what it was, but the strange thing is it's drier than it was this morning, and we didn't have any real problems with oversteer. So it's strange to have so much oversteer. I had it coming onto the main straight in the high-speed corners, and it was very, very twitchy. And then, yeah, it happened again, but got the car back without, you know, missing a rear wing. But yeah, lucky it's not Saturday, really.
Polystyrene is obviously a lot harder than we might think it is.
Yeah, the rear wing's not designed to go rearwards, backwards into things. So yeah, did its job anyway and got it back. So.
I spoke to you before the session and you were sort of uncertain as to about the conditions and whether the drivers should actually been going out. Presumably that's clouded your view a bit more, has it?
The strange thing was, as I said, it seems slightly, you know, it's not so much running water as there was this morning, but we put new tyres on for the run, and maybe that was the problem. But yeah, very eventful.
Thanks, Jen.
Okay, Jen.
So 5 drivers to go. Next man out will be Giancarlo Fisichella in the Jordan. Then we'll have Antonio Pizzonia, Justin Wilson, Mark Webber and Olivier Panis. That's championship order. None of these guys have scored any points yet, but it's according to what their best place finishes have been. As you say, Martin, astonishing really that Olivier Panis is dead last in the championship. He's been fairly competitive, certainly in qualifying in Australia and in Malaysia. There's a good look at what they call the intermediate style tyre, just a very light groove on it. And you can see in very heavy rain conditions that groove would not be able to deal with large amounts of standing water. Huge puddles, it just wouldn't be able to disperse the water fast enough. Fisichella out on track in the Jordan. He's not really had the best of starts to this Formula 1 season. He's best finish so far. Well, he hasn't even got himself into the top 10 yet. And really, Jordan underachieving a little bit at the start of this season.
Well, quite clearly, I mean, he's running behind Furman in this session, which means he's behind him in the championship. So neither Jordan with a point to the name, despite the top 8 getting points now instead of the top 6 in a Grand Prix. And again, another team I'm sure that would have hoped they'd have a point or two now, along with Toyota and Jaguar. But Fisichella, you'd expect him to be quicker than Furman on a 1:28.0, just because of his greater knowledge, confidence and experience of this track and of these kind of conditions in a Formula 1 car. And now he starts to build up speed. And heads towards that braking zone down into turn 1. And that is where you do look at the brake marker boards in situations like that, where you've got to pick a braking point, and you want to pick that braking point, yet you can't see the corner because it falls away. The huge difference in straight line speeds there is because it's wet, and in the dry they'll all be flat out past that speed camera there, but in the wet it's in the braking zone, so it will depend. And he looked like he was 50 kilometers an hour slower than Montoya down the straight. He's not. It's just that where they take the speeds will be in the braking zone for a wet track, but wouldn't be in the braking zone for a dry track, of course, with so much more grip and so much more corner entry speed.
Fisichella into the bogey turn, which has caused so many drivers grief on this qualifying session, including Michael Schumacher. That's CCTV, incidentally, you can see written on the airbox. It's not doesn't mean that Jordan are on closed circuit television or anything like that. It's a very innovative deal that Eddie Jordan has struck with Chinese television. They have 26 million people watching in China the Formula 1 Grand Prix, and it's a marketing initiative trying to attract some Chinese sponsors into Formula 1. It's a very, very interesting idea. I'm sure it will work very well for the Jordan team, and certainly McLaren and Jaguar are pretty upset that they didn't get a piece of that action, because they want to break into China. Big twitch there from Fisichella, who, like Rubens Barrichello, has always been very good in these changeable conditions. What's he managed here? 11th for Fisichella. So he's ahead of his teammate Furman by 1.5 seconds, but he's a good way adrift of pace setter Rubens Barrichello.
Yes, curiously, that's the second Jordan that didn't register a time at the second beam, so maybe they have to reposition their sensors or something that are in a defined zone in the car, but not an absolute position. Jaguar there cutting the line for the pit lane entry, which you are allowed to do, and down comes Pizzonia then into turn 1, a Brazilian driver. Surprised me that he hasn't done more racing here. Seems like he's done just a little bit of racing. I thought they were all here for karting and Formula 4, Formula 3, but not the case for him. But of course he's from a different part of the country altogether. Going down to the end of sector 1 then, giving that standing water a very wide berth. That does compromise your braking zone a little bit. tentatively on the throttle, and a very steady, have to say, very steady first sector then for Pitsonia, but no problems, no dramas. How will he get on in the middle part of the lap?
Well, Martin Zilli's track guide this week with Antonio Pitsonia. Watch out for that tomorrow on ITV. The Pizza Man, as he is known in the Jaguar team. And he's failed to deliver, really, at the moment, I have to say, the Pizza Man. First 2 Grand Prix have not been what he would have hoped them to be, especially in qualifying. Had a bit of a spin this morning. It's been an eventful start to his Brazilian Grand Prix weekend, but it's a track he's very, very fast on. And that maybe if tomorrow is dry, the qualifying session, you might well see something quite spectacular from Antonio Pitsonia.
He's done a very good middle sector, James. So a solid first sector, a good middle sector. This could put him sort of top 8, somewhere in the top 8 actually. He can keep it all pointing in the right direction as he heads towards the line. Pitsonia then moves into 6th indeed. So a good run in the second half of the lap, and very rightly so, applauded by the crowd here. You can hear them in the crowd, and also by the team themselves.
Well, being told by our F1 ITV pit crew that Pitsonia's time there was set in the spare Jaguar, so obviously he had some sort of drama with his race car before the session. Well, in fact, he crashed it this morning, so the damage they weren't able to repair it after he went off this morning. And here we have Justin Wilson on track, man, who took 8 minutes to lift him out of the car in Malaysia. So bad was the pain in his shoulder. He put a nerve out and to have quite a lot of therapy to get him back on track again after his hands device cut into his shoulder. But anyway, glad to see Justin back fit and well behind the wheel of a Formula 1 car. Goes straight through the middle of the standing water, which Pitsonia gave such a wide berth to, and that's a very cautious first sector for Justin Wilson.
Yes, couldn't really see why. Must just be lacking general straight line speed, because it looked fine in the turns 1, 2 and 3 into the middle part of the lap there. And it's quite a little crest there, doesn't show up so much on the camera. The camera's quite high on the car, but the circuit disappears out of view from the driver's eye line, and it's quite enjoyable in here because the corner's banked and it just sort of wills you to get on the throttle and hurdle up the hill. And this is a tricky corner to slow down for, because it just keeps turning right when you really want to break in a straight line. Now Megullo, that long, bumpy left. He's chasing the throttle through there, isn't he? Now he's getting some confidence. Breaks a second timing beam, and he's still going to be something like, greater than 3 seconds off the pace. His teammate Verstappen did a 1:26.8. Wilson then back end stepping out. You've got such a lot of downforce though as you're doing 160, 170 miles an hour that normally you can correct it as long as you don't aquaplane. And a 28.3 then for Justin Wilson, 1.5 seconds slower than Verstappen on a track I suggest is getting slightly quicker now. He'll be disappointed with that.
He will, particularly as his middle sector was comparable with Cristiano de Matters, who is up in the top 10 in 9th place. So the first and third sectors for Justin Wilson just didn't quite work out. He did all the hard work in the twisty bits, no problem, but the big uphill bit and the long straight down to the first corner, where power really is of the essence, even in the wet conditions, obviously had something to do with it. Mark Webber, good lord, look at that, 4/100ths of a second faster than Rubens Barrichello. And are we going to get a little twist in the tail here in our Friday first qualifying session here for the Brazilian Grand Prix? Mark Webber in the Jaguar, and don't forget that Antonio Pitsonia in the sister car just about 5 minutes ago went P6. Can Webber keep it together, beat his teammate Pitsonia, and even have a go at Rubens Barrichello? Well, Pitsonia's time, 1:25.764, Barrichello's 1:23.249. If Webber dare dream of getting that sort of pace out of the car. Half the lap gone, what's he done in the middle sector?
Well, it looked very, very good, it has to be said. It's such a long sector, it's always difficult to tell, but it looked, and he's quickest of all again by some margin actually. He really was hustling it through the apexes. So Webber then, I think, is, as you say, going to put a real bit of spice into the end of this Friday afternoon session, as he, I think, will clearly go fastest of anybody. Track getting better and better, but I don't think, yes he does indeed.
Fantastic lap! Well, we had a round of applause for Pitsonia a few minutes ago, but what about that for Mark Webber? He said yesterday he'd been very cautious, really, in qualifying so far. This new single lap qualifying, not really wanting to make too much of a fool of himself by sticking it into the barriers. But here on Friday in Brazil, he has pulled something very special out of the bag on a drying track. It just shows you the way these new rules work. that you have to go out in your allotted slot and you have to deal with the conditions as they are at the time. They were pretty dicey, tricky conditions for a lot of the drivers earlier on, and maybe there is some advantage to being almost last in the World Championship. You get to go out on a quick track. Fantastic opportunity now then for Olivier Panis. Can he capitalise on it? No, he can't. 0.4 of a second down in the first sector. So that lap from Webber really is looking special, isn't it, Martin?
It certainly was a good run. The Jaguar working very well in the wet. Usually if you get a nice balance, if you can afford to run the car a little bit softer and still not hurt too much on the aerodynamics, you do get that effect. Panis, his teammate went quite well, didn't he? D'Amata, he's 10th at the moment on a 126.5, and it does seem the track's getting better and better, so Panis has a chance to shuffle the pack and move himself. Really struggling under braking there, and collected it all up. Let's see how hard he chases the throttle through here. Not that hard, it has to be said, and certainly wasn't carrying anything like the apex speeds of Webber in the Jaguar. But nonetheless, I think Panis can put himself, again, just in the tail end of the top 10 with this run.
It stopped raining outside in the last few minutes. Great news for Mark Webber, great news for Olivier Panis. If he can capitalise on it in this last part of the lap, he goes 6th. Displaces his old teammate from BAR, Jacques Villeneuve, down into 7th place. So everybody has set a time except for Jenson Button, who spun and crashed on his single flying lap. And the Jaguar team have something to smile about. It's a shame, I'm sure they're thinking that this isn't Saturday, because that would mean they were on pole position, and what a story that would be, having a Jag on pole position.
But of course tomorrow they have to do it with their race fuel on board, which will make it even harder in the wet conditions. But Button goes first tomorrow then. He's 20th today and last today with that spin of his, and Webber goes last. Let's hope the weather plays into his hands tomorrow.
Well, the forecast certainly is for more changeable conditions throughout the weekend. It's been a very, very interesting hour with some very interesting incidents as well. And a very happy Jaguar garage down there. We'll be hearing from more of the drivers coming up shortly, and lots to think about down there in the Jaguar.
First time in his career, a boost for him and Jaguar. He starts last in qualifying 2. Barrichello ahead of Raikkonen and the unhappy Coulthard. Panis, Villeneuve, Pizzoni, Alonso and Frentzen all in the top 10. Ralf Schumacher and Montoya well down. 3 British drivers first to go in qualifying 2. Button, Wilson and Furman.
Well done,
Touch the brakes, round he went.